Hello, everyone, and thank you, Dermot, for that really interesting talk on the IAA, where we're streaming from today. So now we'll have a discussion on the subject of brand importance and standing out from your competition. So I'm delighted to be joined by Dara McMahon here, Director of Marketing and Digital Experience at Aer Lingus. Dara, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Great, thanks for the invitation. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and only sorry we can't all be meeting in one big room and having a nice big discussion on branding and the like.
Of course, hopefully next year we'll have something of that sort. So to kick us off, it's been customary today for all our speakers to introduce themselves when live on interviews. So perhaps you could give us a bit of background about yourself, introduce yourself, the role that you're in Aer Lingus, and also a small bit about brand importance in Aer Lingus.
Great. So Dara McMahon is my name. I'm living out in Malahide, not far from the airport, so that's very handy for work. Studied English and History in Trinity College back in the late 80s. I joined Guinness as it was then, it's now Diageo, but it was very much Guinness when I joined it. I joined on their first graduate program back in 1987, which is quite a while ago now. What was interesting then was they were only looking for men. So there was 13 guys and me who joined, and that's because there was a technical element to the training. It kind of felt I certainly paved the way for women in that role, because the whole gender bias is completely under control now, shall we say. So I had many happy years in Guinness. It was a fabulous company to work for. Worked on lots of the big brands, worked in the Guinness brand, worked in the Budweiser brand, and moved on into marketing manager roles, channel manager roles. We're all kind of mainly on the marketing side. From there, I was headhunted to Ulster Bank as head of marketing, and stayed there for a good few years, probably more years, if I'm honest, than I had really planned. So it was very much a career there of two halves, pre-banking crisis of 2008, etc., and post. So the pre was brilliant, the post not so hot, but I probably learned more in the post. Learned a lot about banking behaviors and bad banking behaviors, not necessarily obviously on the marketing front, but certainly in other parts of the business that, quite frankly, would leave you a little bit embarrassed having worked in a bank. So I left the bank in 2014 and joined a small organization called NewsBrands Ireland. They had been newspapers, national newspapers of Ireland before I joined, and I rebranded to NewsBrands Ireland, because obviously newspapers are more than just about the physical paper. There's the whole e-side of it, which is obviously probably more important now. So I stayed there for a couple of years. It was based out in Ballsbridge, which didn't particularly suit Malahide, as you can imagine, particularly when you're allergic to the dark, and I prefer my car. The role came up in Aer Lingus, and I jumped at it, and I really felt it was the role for me. I feel my career is kind of bookended by working on two big, strong Irish iconic brands, Guinness and Aer Lingus. So from the black to the green. But it's been a fantastic experience. I'm there since the end of 2016. I look after the brand, obviously, look after customer insights, which is obviously all about the research, which drove a lot of the brand initiatives that we have had over the last 2 years or thereabouts. I look after campaign advertising, look after the guest experience, which is basically everything you experience from when you get on board the aircraft, from the airport on flight and the other side. So they're the main things that I look after in Aer Lingus. Brilliant company to work for. Devastated what's happening is happening at the moment. I had 3 fantastic years before all of this kicked off, but it will be back. So just a bit on the brand in Aer Lingus. It's a much loved brand. I'm very proud to say I work for Aer Lingus, as much as I'm very proud to say that I worked for Guinness. So 2 big brands that we're delighted to have in this country. So when I joined, the branding on the planes, as you would know, you still see it around today. Obviously, the heavy green on top, the white on the bottom, and the wavy shamrock, as it was on the tail. I was given the opportunity to take a relook at refreshing all of that. And I was delighted to get involved in that project, because not often you get to actually kind of redo the livery on a kind of big brand like Aer Lingus. I'd actually done it in Guinness way back in my day. I got an email from an ex-colleague reminding me how I'd rebranded 10,000 pubs with the new livery, and we did that all in about a week and a half. Rebranding an airline is kind of different because you can't ground all the planes at once, obviously, to repaint them. So you repaint them on a cycle that you probably be a little bit more familiar with in there than most people, that from a safety perspective, you have to repaint the planes every 6-7 years anyway. So generally, a rebrand of an airline would take place over about 6 or 7 years. And we had planned to do it in 2 or 3, or about 2.5 to 3 years. That's obviously slightly on ice at the moment, given that we just don't have money to be painting aircraft. Our cash is really important at the moment, so it probably will take probably 4 to 5 years to do the whole fleet. I can speak a little bit about that project now, or if you want me to talk about anything else, but I can happy to talk about that project if you want, Josh.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting project, and I think if you can also sort of link it in, obviously the rebrand back in 2019 was a big change for Aer Lingus, and obviously retaining the shamrock as an iconic national symbol is really important. So maybe you can talk a bit about that as well.
We could talk for hours about it, but I'll try and condense it and not bore everybody to tears on it. Yeah, so everything that we did with the rebrand was absolutely based in research. So first of all, to say that the original brand, as I said, it wasn't broken and people loved it. So we kind of bit of an interpretation that I kind of embarked in this whole project thinking it's not broken, so why fix it? But it definitely needed a bit of a refresh. So we initially did some research in Dublin, because obviously Ireland is a very core market for us. And 3 things came out of the initial piece of research, which they said, you must retain the name, Aer Lingus, which seems a little bit obvious. But if you think about it, in some markets, Aer Lingus name doesn't exactly say that you're an airline, and that can be a little bit of a barrier. So you've always got Air Canada, British Airways, they do what they say on the tin, but Aer Lingus, what exactly does that mean in markets where we're not known? But very much our home market that you need to retain the name. Need to retain the colour green or a shade of green. So again, no big surprise. And absolutely, you cannot touch. We must retain the shamrock. So with those 3 pieces, we went off with a design company called Lippincott, and they came up with various iterations of design for us. And then we went into further research with those. Went to Berlin, went to Paris and London. And then very importantly, when we got some gleans of information from those markets, we went to our big ambitious market, the US. So for many years, we had a very much a short haul focus with a bit of a nod to the United States. But in the last 5 or 6 years, the United States have been where all of our roots have really emerged, and lots of potential. And we have this great big ambition to be, the leading value carrier across the Atlantic. So obviously on short haul, we would always be watching what Ryanair are doing, and it's very much a battle out of Ireland between the 2 of us. But looking across the Atlantic, it was very much looking to the US carriers. It was very important that, we didn't alienate the diaspora, who've been our bread and butter in the US for many, many years. But if we were going to grow, we needed to move outside of the diaspora. And we very much needed to say, we're not just an airline that flies to Ireland. In fact, we're an airline that we're bringing to Ireland, absolutely delighted to do that. Bring you to Shannon and Dublin, but we will bounce you into Europe on our smaller aircraft, etc. So with this kind of dub hub thing, which was the big driving growth before the whole pandemic. So interestingly, we did our research in New York, Boston, and Chicago. And I say that's interesting because, if you like, they're the only 3 routes that we're actually flying at the moment. So we certainly went to the right cities in terms of the diaspora and kind of getting a wider impact from customers there. So again, they loved what we had done with the plane. We had reduced the amount of green on the aircraft, very much to say we were still very much an Irish carrier, but we're an international carrier. And we don't want to be just seen as this one that, is a one hop across the pond and here you are, that we do, as we say, bounce you into Europe and the UK. So that was very important. So hence probably a lot more white on the plane. And then on the choice of greens, we had to, modernize the green. So we have the dark teal on the tail and coming down in a swoosh onto the body. And that kind of whole swoosh piece gives it that little friendlier nod. If you look at Lufthansa's aircraft, for example, Lufthansa are very much, a 5-star airline. I think they're Europe's only 5-star airline. So if you look at theirs, it's unashamedly navy and white. And that says a lot about their brand. So that it's very much the navy and white says that they're professional, their on-time piece is very important, but they're a little bit cold. So they used to have a lot of yellow in their tail, and you'll see some of their aircraft have that yellow in the tail, but they took away that sunshine yellow, which is, for us, that would look a bit odd to kind of take away that piece of personality that you have. But what they really want to convey is that they're, a professional, efficient outfit. And certainly their livery does that. So counter to that, we very much wanted to say, no, we are still, very friendly airline, very hospitable. And so we went about getting those 2 shades of green. So we have a lighter shade on the darker teal on the tail, which is the shamrock. So the shamrock is green. So it was green, although it was actually white. Believe it or not, it was used to be a very common quiz question: what colour is the Aer Lingus shamrock? And it was indeed white, not green, going back pre-96, I think. So those kind of cues very much came out in the research, that this is a big international airline, but it still remains friendly and efficient. So that's the type of thing that we're trying to get across with the rebrand. So we launched, as you know, the beginning of 2019. In January, we had a big unveil in the hangar. We had a big A330 behind an actual curtain, invited the media in to see it. And then we had the big unveiling, which I had the pleasure of doing, which is kind of, I think, probably the highlight of my career. Unveiling an A330 was extremely exciting. And just as the A330, the curtain dropped on it, an A320 had been painted in Shannon, and it reversed out of the hangar in Shannon, and it flew out over the Aran Islands. And we got the most amazing footage. It was just a lovely, fabulous Irish summer, sunny day in January, when you get those extraordinary bright days. And we got amazing footage, which we're still using today. So an absolutely amazing launch. We very quickly then, painted up a number of aircraft. We had about 10 done by the summer, and more then followed with that. And then obviously the plan, as I said, was to do the rest. So this other part of the rebrand was obviously the new uniforms. So the last uniform had been designed by Louise Kennedy way back, in about 94. So it was well over 20 years old. So Louise did go through a tender process, but she came out very strong in the tender process. And there was a great bit of continuity in history by working with Louise. So we worked with her. And again, we very much wanted to say, we're a modern international airline. But we want to nod to our heritage. So some of the things are sacrosanct, a little bit like the branding. So you must use green, a shade of green that'll be modern. And there was all sorts of leaks out that we're going to use bottle green, and it's amazing how these things get out. But the shade of green that she came up with was absolutely fabulous. But we were a modern airline, so trousers absolutely for the female cabin crew was a no-brainer. A friend, people who know me would sort of say, easily knowing you were involved. That's something like that was just an absolute no-brainer to have. People are coming to work. They're pushing carts sometimes up a hill. When the plane hasn't quite leveled off. And trousers were a no-brainer. Initially, some of the staff were kind of resistant and kind of went, well, I don't think they're for me. They might be for other women, but not for me. But they soon became a very firm favourite with everybody. So that was great to see that. The other thing, we completely relaxed. I was a little bit surprised when people assumed that, wearing makeup, was mandatory. Absolutely not mandatory. Most of the staff prefer to wear it. But if they don't, that's entirely their choice and don't need to. So again, lots of cues to being a modern international airline. The famous Aer Lingus bun, which you'll all be very familiar with, and the hair. Again, totally relaxing the style of hairdos. If you want to wear the bun, wear it, knock yourselves out. But when I joined, the bun and red lipstick were kind of the go-to items. And they're both gone. If you want to wear them, great. If you don't, a lot more relaxing of the rules around the do's and don'ts, and but yet remaining, highly professional. So we launched the uniform in January 2020 in the CHQ there on the Liffey. In a fabulous launch, again, a beautiful day, lovely photographs of the staff, male and female, going across the pedestrian bridge there. Very proud of those moments. And then about 2 weeks later, a little bit later, about a month later, we launched it in New York. So we launched it in New York on the 26th of February. Had it been 1 week later, it would not have been launched in New York because of the pandemic. So luckily we got the whole thing launched. Luckily, as I say, because it might not have happened. Sadly, a lot of uniforms are sitting in wardrobes not being used. The staff who continue to work, continue to wear them, we're getting great feedback from them and great feedback, from customers as well. But both, I suppose, the brand ID and the uniform were absolutely grounded in customer research. So not a personal preference for me or anybody on my team, but absolutely grounded in research. And of course, giving Louise Kennedy quite a little bit of license to bring her flair to the project, which she did in droves. It was absolutely amazing to work with, and just so highly professional and enthusiastic, and nothing was too big an ask for her to do. So great to work with. So I could rabbit on for a lot more. Or do you want to move me in a different direction, or?
Maybe if we just have one sort of final brief point, maybe obviously the last year has been extremely difficult for airlines in particular, with the lack of interaction with passengers and the lack of passengers on board. So obviously Aer Lingus have had a number of standout events since then. Obviously we had the China PPE flights, we've had the vaccine flights delivering vaccines into Ireland, and we've also had the recent announcement of Aer Lingus UK flying from Manchester over to the Caribbean and the east coast of the US. So maybe if you can just maybe summarize briefly how Aer Lingus has been able to maintain their brand and connect with customers during a difficult time online.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of a brand, a brand, as you all know, is how you think and feel when you interact with a product or a brand, so like Aer Lingus. So we would know that how we treat people during the pandemic will be how we will be judged, and how a lot of airlines will be judged out the other end. So an incredibly difficult year, starting off with the pandemic, starting with a lot of grounding of the aircraft, halting of travel. So a lot of challenges. So one of the things that we quickly did was change around the business model. So from being all things passengers to being absolutely nearly all things cargo. And so we had those over 250 flights to Beijing to collect PPE, and our staff were only delighted to get involved with those. So for us, obviously we were doing our piece for the pandemic, but importantly as well, we were keeping pilots in the sky, we're keeping the aircraft in the sky. And so in terms of rotating hours, to be getting back ready to fly as soon as things were up and good, and for us to do so was very important. At that stage, this kind of April, May time, we really did think we would be back, summer, end of the summer, and lo and behold, here we are a full year later, and we're not flying passengers anything like we would like to be. So a couple of things obviously happened. We're doing lots more cargo flights now. If you have that flight 24, you'll track flights from Stuttgart to Boston, for example. So there's quite a bit more going on there. The PPE has obviously been solved in terms of we had to get that here very quickly, as quickly as possible. Now there's lots of other ways it can get into the country, being produced here as well, a lot more cost efficiently. So that piece of work has dried up. So we obviously have a lot of aircraft on the ground, can't fly them out of Ireland to anywhere, in Europe. We're literally flying to Paris, London and Amsterdam at the moment. And so an opportunity came up out of the UK. They seem to be a lot faster out of the blocks than us with the vaccination. And the US as well. I think I read this morning, 150 million people vaccinated in the US, and a huge proportion, nearly half the population of Britain are vaccinated at this stage. They are undergoing a little bit of a slowdown, but a huge number. So obviously that kind of corridor between the UK and US presented itself with an opportunity for us, A, to send aircraft there, B, send some pilots, and crew who want to go there can go there. We obviously have to recruit on the ground there because not everybody, it doesn't suit everybody to be obviously based out of Manchester. So we will have an A330 and 2 NEOs initially going to JFK and Orlando from the 29th of July, and then Barbados, which is very exciting, from the 20th of October. So the Barbados flights, we'll make those available out of Dublin, Cork and Shannon, or out of Dublin, Cork and Belfast. So that you can obviously connect via Manchester and go to Barbados. And actually the bookings are really, really strong out of Ireland. I just think there's such a pent up desire, and people really, really want to fly. And particularly if they don't fly this summer, that'll be 2 summers that people mightn't have had their summer holidays. So I think that people are very keen to kind of get going, and the winter sun is very appealing for quite a big market. So that's gone extremely well. We have a 12-week campaign now in the Greater Manchester area, obviously advertising the Orlando piece, which has been very appealing for families to go to Orlando. And obviously with Thomas Cook pulling out, they've left a big opportunity. And Manchester is the obvious place to go. We wouldn't touch London because it's very well served to the US as it stands. So Manchester represented the best opportunity for us. So we took it. I mean, that's it. We've still more spare aircraft. It's not like we wouldn't consider somewhere else either. But hopefully, look, this will all blow over at some stage. We will be back traveling. We're really hoping that we get an end of summer traveling at least. Definitely into the winter, we should be, most people will be vaccinated at that stage. Hopefully countries that people are interested in traveling to, will have reciprocal arrangements, and that we'll have just a much safer experience, and that everybody can actually get back flying, because I think we've all had enough of this. Certainly I, for one, are looking forward to being on an airplane again soon, and I hope you are too.
Of course, absolutely, for sure. So look, I'm sure we could stay here all day and talk about marketing and brand importance for Aer Lingus. It's definitely very interesting. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but thank you very much, Dara McMahon, for joining us today. And we'll hopefully hear from you again in the future, and hopefully see you on board maybe one day.
Great,
when
thank
we're
you.
allowed
It's been
to
a
again.
pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'd love to come and see you all in person, hopefully in September, October. Thanks indeed for the opportunity.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dara. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So next up, we have 2 keynote speakers, our final 2 keynote speakers of the day. So we've got Andy O'Shea and we've got Nicole Dreyer-Langlet. Nicole is joining us today from Germany, where she's a VP of Research and Technology for Airbus. Nicole has over 20 years experience in the aerospace industry, holding roles such as Senior Manager, Fuselage Interior, Aerostructure Procurement, Supply Chain Quality Field Engineer, Equipment and Systems, and Vice President, Cabin and Cargo, A330 and A380. As well as Nicole, we also have Andy O'Shea. Andy O'Shea is well known in the world of training. Andy O'Shea was a pilot in the Irish Air Corps for 15 years. And after this, he continued his career at Ryanair. He's 27 years of experience in roles such as head of flight and cabin crew training, and chief instructor on the 737-200. He's currently the chief executive officer of the Airline Pilot Club, who seeks to help, advise, and protect members while on their journey to becoming an airline pilot. And he is also the chief executive officer of Aviation Partners and Specialists, providing aircrew training solutions to airlines and ATOs. So it's great to have Andy and Nicole with us today.